Yeah, so I am not the main event here. I'm Robin Dunn. This is Jane Hammer. She is the one who's going to be telling you the really important stuff. I'm going to be sharing with you my mistakes. And most of them are human foibles because nature knows what she is doing. To introduce Jane, I stole this off of her refrigerator. This poem makes us think of you, both with your love of sustainable nourishing and cultivation and in the way you engage so thoughtfully with your chosen lifestyle. Picking raspberries. Once the thicket opens and lets you enter, and the first berry dissolves on your tongue, you will remember nothing of your old life. It continues from there. Jane, go for it.
All right. Hi, welcome. Something else about me is my hearing and my vision are not top-notch, so any way that you all can come forward or raise your hand if you can't hear what I'm saying, but I'll hear you much better if you try to project. And what I'm hoping to do today is really involve you all. I was just in Derek Christensen's workshop right prior. Was anybody else there? Yeah. And I would definitely point to his website and slides from that presentation. He's got a lot of how-tos, practical implications of some of the things that we're going to be talking about today. But where I was going with that is that I want to make sure that everyone contributes. Like where I come from, he comes from a place of practical observation, and where I come from, and then he goes and does his research. And where I come from is I'm trying to pull in some of the research and ways of looking at things and prompt you all to try these things on your farms and come back with your observations. So anything that I'm touching on here today that you've had experience with, positive, negative, whatever, please do jot down a note as we're talking and feel encouraged to share. So we're going to have a structure where we sort of introduce some of the topics that we're doing, perhaps a new way of interacting with your plants, and then pulling in different ways of applying those ways of looking at the plants, but that is part of what I'm relying on you for as well. So humility and curiosity and experimentation are the names of the game here. I am still, speaking of experimentation, I'm still trying to pull up my slideshow, but Robin's going to go ahead and take it away. Okay. Robin has Soil Food Web. She's a Soil Food Web student and also UMaine Extension gardening teacher.
Assistant
gardening
to the real
teacher.
Professional, yes.
And we met in the West as part of a program with Nicole Masters and Integrity Soils. So that's where we're both coming from, but she's got a lot more experience with the microscope, direct experience with compost analysis and things like that. So, yeah.
And what I really am is a music teacher who hated gardening, just absolutely hated it because I worked with a master gardener and we weeded 8 hours a day. And I thought that's probably what gardening was, and I hated it. But I loved the smell of my mom's compost. So I asked her, what do you put in? And I became a cook, learning how, what to put in. And she's one of the best teachers I've ever had, and she's never taken a science course in her life. And I made fantastic compost, and my roommate didn't want to use it. She was the gardener. Well, we just had a tiny little backyard, so I had to have a place to put it, so I decided I better start a garden. And I started a garden, and I loved it. I just loved it. And then I just needed to do more and more and more. And eventually, I started to wonder, why? Why is this working? Why is this not working? As I made mistakes. And so I started taking science courses, still just a music teacher going, what does that word mean? Chelate? Chelate? How do you even pronounce it? And I learned a bunch of stuff. And now we've moved to Maine from Colorado onto a land that's so badly damaged And all of this scientific information, I still don't know how. How do you get started from nothing and get it to go to something? How do I get this back to PowerPoint. Thank you so much. I owe you.
Yeah.
So, starting the conversation, if you are not great at starting conversations with the land, with nothing but a wing and a prayer. I learned these things our first summer here. I don't know if you can read it. I don't think you can.
Go to your presenter view.
Presenter view, okay. View. Presenter view. Oh, just do that. Okay, thank you.
That icon. No, this icon right here.
Oh, this one?
Yep.
This one. Okay, thank you. So don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Oh my gosh, I made so many mistakes. Change the conditions in the soil and you change who's living there. Change who's living there and you completely alter the future of the plants. Change the futures of the plants you want to grow and they'll give back to that underground community who will then further alter for the better the future of your plants. Failed experiment number 1. I was given a worm bin in December, and it went great. Well, I followed all the directions, and then I thought, I want to give them a special treat. So I put in steel-cut oats. The next day, my whole worm bin smelled like fried worms. I killed my worms because I heated them up to death. Those steel-cut oats just turned, it was so hot, I stuck my finger in, and I'm like, so I killed my first worms. But they did generate some nice worm castings. I cried for a week because I loved my worms. I would go down and coo to them. My second worm bin inhabitants, I killed because I thought I don't want to use shredded paper. I learned from a friend who has a composting business that you cannot sell it as organic compost if you use paper because of all the horrible chemicals that are in paper. And so I thought, I know, I'll use wood. I'll just use wood shavings. And I killed my worms because they died of thirst, because the wood could not hold on to the water. But they did make some nice castings for me. So then I thought, okay, here we are in the spring. We want to plant. We want to do something for this poor land. Let's buy some organically certified compost. It had been already raining and raining and raining. We got this compost. It was horrible. I looked under the microscope, nothing in it. It didn't even look like there was any organic matter. And I judged them, which I should also call mistake 3B. Don't judge till you've walked in their shoes. First attempt at making hot compost, we had nothing. And I went to a farmer, he had cattle, and I said, do you have manure? He said, yes, but only unseasoned. I said, I'll take anything. It's a start. So I made my first compost with my life mate, and it got too hot. Had to take it apart. I want you to imagine me taking little pieces of cow manure and trying to make them this size in a compost heap this big. And then for a few days we had this incredible success, made a thermophilic compost that was the right temperature, had the right ingredients in it, beautiful microbial life, flagellates, and amoebae, and nematodes, and everybody you want. And then it started to rain. Change the conditions in the soil, and you change who lives there. So then I took back my judgments about the compost company. This is my pathetic attempt to cover my compost heap. And the rain washed down the sides and into the bottom of the compost and was soaked up through, and it still turned into this anaerobic sludge. But even out of failure, successes can spring. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Here is a squash that we tried to grow using that compost that we purchased. Look how those leaves look. They're pretty sad. But look where it went. This is my failed compost heap. That's my failed compost heap. All of those wonderful nutrients that leached out downhill you can't see it from here, but there's another line that goes this way from the plant that went to where that water flowed from the compost heap. And we got some really nice squash right there near the compost heap. And it was enjoyed by a deer because it had traveled outside of our protected area. So this is what's left of our squash.
But it looked good.
It did.
before that.
It did. It was beautiful. And this was another one of our experiments trying to do a deep mulching Gaia's garden recipe. We got a nice squash. What about my worm castings? Okay, I want to introduce to you who lives in my worm castings. I don't even know if they're alive or if they're in spore stage right now.
It's happening.
It's happening. Okay.
All right.
And these are who helped me with the next success I'm going to show you. Thank you, John, for doing this. Oh. We've got some nice fungi right there. Ooh, oh, whoa. Looks like you've got I think that's a ciliate or a, yeah. Oh.
Chileans are bad. Center button.
Oh.
What's the
Oh,
magnification?
no, sorry. So this is, we're actually at the lowest magnification at the moment.
Yeah, and so you're going to be able to see the fungi, and if there are any nematodes, you'll be able to see them at this level. I think they're, oh yeah, and the tardigrades and the rotifers, you'll be able to see them at this level. If we go another level down, or deeper, then you're going to be able to see the flagellates and the ciliates.
Oh.
You should have been able to see, yeah, look at this guy. He's just,
That's a rotifer.
okay, that's a rotifer, thanks.
Good or bad?
Okay, there we've got ourselves a flagellate, right there. And there's another flagellate. Flagellates are great news. They're fantastic. Oh, look at that. Wow. Okay, look at that beautiful amoeba. Hello, sweetheart. Tons of good stuff going on in here, and they are what created my next success. I spent hours looking at all the life in the soil. I just couldn't get enough of it. We might not get another tape today.
No, there was two.
Oh, were there? There were one. There's one of our wonderful nematodes doing his work, eating the protozoa and the bacteria and fungi, depending on what they like to eat, doing their work in the soil.
What's that round thing?
Hey, baby. That might be a spore. I don't see any movement in it. Oh, that is a baby that's a baby nematode. You can see its form. I think it is. Let's see. No, that's not.
Yeah, it's something alive.
It is alive. It's
just
a double cell wall, so
somebody-
doesn't that make it amoeba?
This. That's a
Whoa.
ciliate.
Yeah, there goes the ciliate.
Which one?
And there's a flagellate. Up there. Oh,
Yeah.
behind there was a flagellate. Where'd the ciliate go? Yeah, look at that. That's a ciliate, that huge guy there. And there goes a nematode.
Ciliates were bad. Well, it depends on the volume, really, that you have that's going on. Where did you, oh, there we go.
Okay, so let's turn that off, and I'm going to go back to my thing here to show this. Thank you so much for doing that. Okay, so I did not keep a log. I did not do exact amounts. I just wanted to not have to wade through the mud to get to the bird feeder. So I tried some different experiments. I used roughly the same amount of legume seed mix, but I put different amounts of worm casting extract into these plots you're about to see. This one got the most worm extract, and it grew lush and thick. Now, right here, that's all moss. That's what our whole backyard was. And you step down this deep into mud. And after this grew, you could step there and you didn't fall in. It was very nice. These two, this is where I accidentally dumped our ashes from our fireplace, so that was an accident. But these two got medium amounts of worm compost extract. And this one got hardly any worm compost extract from my worm castings from my failed compost, my failed worm bins. So I just want to say, the traveling squash taught me start the conversation. The plants want to live, so whatever you can do to notch things up even one notch, they'll work with it. The unseasoned cow manure taught me bring what you have. Start from where you are. The whole summer taught me don't let any failure deprive you of a sense of fun and of play. And moving from paralysis to imperfect action taught me just do it. Thank you. The end.
On the stage, he said. So, I wanted to find out who else, besides the nematodes and the fungi and the bacteria and the amoeba, protozoa that we just saw are in the room. First of all, I forgot to ask if anyone we have interpreters here? Was anyone planning on getting this interpreted? Okay. I need technological interpretation, but I think I figured out how to get my slides up here. I just need the changeover. Or should I just put the thumb drive in? What would be the best?
Do you have an HDMI output? I don't believe you do.
Okay, so I'll do the thumb drive. Do you want to work on getting that pulled up?
Yeah.
Okay. So
We can take.
So can we take
just
it,
to get
take
a
the program
gander
out first?
on
Can we close down the
where people are
PowerPoint
coming
first?
from, do we have?
Okay.
We're gonna have to take
I
hers
know.
out.
Let me
before her-
close
We
down the
have some
PowerPoint first.
over 10-acre
Okay.
mixed veggie farmers. Do we have anyone that's working with pasture-based systems? Okay. Do we have anyone else over 10 acres? Okay. 10-acre veggies, yeah, okay. And anyone
Here, right?
sort of in the 3 to 10 acre veggie, yeah. Gardeners, okay. Anyone that works with farmers? Okay. And what was the other question? It's not working?
We're working on it.
All right. So what I'm going to put a plug in for a lot of testing, and one of those things that you can do on your farm is learn to use a microscope. And John here and Ruben are going to be giving a workshop at 3:45 on starting to learn what that might mean for you if you learn to use a microscope. And I would also encourage folks to check out the inoculant. There's some microbial inoculant workshop that's also happening later today. I forget what time it was. And then Derek Christensen's work, like I said, with some of the practical applications of
something just
getting
moved
your
on the bottom.
minerals right on your farm. So what I wanted to talk
not
about
formatted
today
for this.
is consulting with your plants as advertised, and testing, not guessing, as John Kemp says, and saving money as a result. So, how many people do an annual soil testing from a soil lab? Yeah? And how many people act on those soil tests? Yeah? So you try to get into your soil what's missing mineral-wise all at once, gradually, How about chelated? Do people work with chelates? Yeah. So in chelated form, are you putting it on your soil or are you putting it on as a foliar? Are you buying it in or making your own?
We put it in a drip irrigation for
Drip, oh, in the irrigation, okay. How many people are working with inoculants and their seeds? Okay, cool, 'cause I'd love to hear how that's going too. So, does everyone know what chelation means? Or what a chelate is? Okay, so maybe were we able to get the slide going?
We're gonna grab, I don't know that.
Okay.
Recognizing
I have a handout here, and I'm happy to send it along to folks if you want to email me. My email's at the bottom of the handout. You can take a picture of your phone at the end. That explains a little bit more in detail how to, like, what a chelate situation is, why you want to chelate your minerals, and then how to work with that in your own situation to a certain extent. So chelation means when you're applying a nutrient or a mineral, a chelate is a cloth. So it's a large organic molecule that attaches to a mineral and makes it much more accessible to plants and other life forms. And chelation can also mean you're grabbing things that you don't want your plants to have, or that they don't want, I should say, and pulling it out of the system or making it immobile. So it's this incredible resource we have. There are great chelators in the form of organic compounds in your compost, in your worm teas, your compost teas, and you can also use them just straight up. So this is fulvic acid. I suspect that there's also humic acid because it's darker colored, and it was made just by a local nutrient supplier that works here in eastern Massachusetts, and pretty cheap. And the recipe that I have here is for 30 acres, and it uses just this amount. So a little goes a long way. Fulvic acid, and cheap and easy to use. It's made, I meant to say, it's made from ancient, like, humic substances that are mined. That's the most reliable way to get, but you can make this from worm compost as well and concentrate it over time. So what I wanted to talk about was,
Jane, what does it do?
so this is a chelator.
And what would it either
So-
get rid of or add?
Well, how would you use it?
Now, what would the benefit of that be?
The benefit of this, fulvic acid promotes availability of any nutrient that you're applying. And it also, so it's not just available and absorbable, but it also helps the cell absorption. And it helps, and I had this great slide. If you look up fulvic acid online, you can see a lot of things listed. It's pretty easy to find. But some of the benefits include, like I said, cell wall permeability, holding on to the nutrients until the plants need them. So tying things together. And it makes it so that you can use less of a nutrient for more bang for your buck. So does that hold clear? And then another benefit, which is cool, is when you're making your own, or what they do when they make you a chelated foliar, is it'll hold the minerals in suspension. So if you get some micronized minerals that you know that your plants need, and we're going to talk about that, you can, instead of it just needing to be agitated the whole time, you just pour this in after you've mixed your minerals into your water and bubble it gently with just, just your little, and like I said, a little goes a long way, especially when you've got a chelated situation. So you can use an aquarium bubbler with just some little stems, air stones in your bucket, or in a larger situation, if you have some way to bubble it gently for 6 hours, and then boom, it turns into sediment on the bottom, water on top, into this lovely, fully suspended, tan-colored mineral chelate that you can dilute and spray on your crops along with other nutrients and extracts that you might be applying. So what I wanted to set the stage for here is, if you're doing your soil testing, you're getting an idea about what is available in the top 6 inches of your soil, what is there, not necessarily available, right? So I would encourage folks to consult your plants before just trying to get it all balanced in the soil, because when you look at soil tissue tests, or plant tissue tests, for instance, which I had a nice slide showing, nice columns, often what comes back, so a plant tissue test can also be like once or twice a year, and you're testing for the minerals that are in your plant tissue that the plant has been able to incorporate over time. So it's sort of like a historical, it's not the sap analysis, that's a different thing. And we'll get into that too. But the plant tissue is just a dried plant sample, send it to the lab of, your crop that you're wanting to look at, or a few crops, and you want to take it when the crop is established, or like early in the pasture growing season, take a representative sample and send it off. And so it's similar to a soil test. There's obviously different ideal ranges depending on the plant tissue that you're sending. And then examine, like, are my plants getting what my soil test is saying is deficient, or are my plants, like, fine, right? Are they getting it, or are they not? And so why wouldn't they be getting what's in your soil, or why might they be getting what's not showing up in enough quantity in your soil? Like, what's the link there? Does anyone have ideas about why plants might be have a different profile of mineral than you're seeing on your soil test?
Ability of the roots to absorb what's there,
What makes it absorbable?
mineralization.
Pardon?
When nutrients are mineralized so the roots can absorb them.
Yeah. It gets more complex than that.
Boron, right?
Plants are involved in a huge community, and they're talking and conversing and listening to a huge underground community called the soil food web, which we were just watching. And that soil food web is responsible for not only making minerals available as the plants need them, but also creating signals. So the plant is sending, some of you have heard Elaine Ingham's whole thing about and maybe John Kemp. People listen to John Kemp. Yeah. So he talks quite a bit about feed the plant and the plant will feed the soil. So, but we're not talking just about the carbohydrates, the photosynthesizing, the plant's putting them down, and that the plant is capturing the sun's energy, feeding that soil microbiome. But there's so much more that we're finding out is going on with that, including conversations. So it's not just building blocks, hard minerals being made available, but all the genetically driven and conversationally driven signals between the plants with each other, but predominantly with the below ground soil food web. And plants can call in helpers. And helpers in the soil can call in helpers based on soil-based signaling molecules. So it goes well beyond nutrients and building blocks and goes into this whole conversation. And this is just cutting edge research for some of us. For some people, some researchers have been working on some of these things for decades. But so one thing.
That's quorum sensing, correct?
So quorum, yes, that was one of my slides. Quorum sensing. Has anyone heard of quorum sensing? All right. Do you?
Spell it?
Somebody want to take a gander? Quorum. A quorum is like enough people there for a vote, right? Oh, we have a quorum. Now we have enough people to vote or to make a difference or to be heard, right? Or we have enough people now that we can send out our message.
Quick question.
So
Do you need anything on this besides the presentation?
I would like to have the slide presentation. But
Besides the presentation, I'm going to reformat it. I copied the files here. I'm going to reformat it so I can use this to copy it over here.
oh,
Is there anything else on here that you need?
no,
Okay.
no, just the slides, yeah. So, yeah.
Is this a seasonal issue? Is it different in the spring versus, the soil form sensing or just the ecosystem? Is it more active in the testing in the spring, summer? Is it seasonally something we should tune into?
I would guess that it is very seasonal and linked to the growth phases of the plants themselves and temperature and all kinds of different stressors.
These are your slides, right?
Oh,
Is that your
yeah,
slides? Okay,
that's
great.
it.
Just confirm. I'm going to reformat this.
Yay! So, does someone want to do you want to try to define quorum sensing or give a brief explanation? No. Yes?
Quorum.
When there's enough organisms, microorganisms in the soil that are a particular species that make it override surrounding system. So like Phytophthora, there's enough Phytophthora spores in an area that they decide to take over this soil, will kick everyone out, or there's no one else to compete against them. So basically, like a fungi will decide what to do. They'll go, decompose wood or whatever. There's enough of them in one to do that essentially.
Yeah, so what might be a pathogen in one situation, change the community, change the soil, change what happens there. A pathogenic genes can be on or off depending on not only how well the plant or other organisms are defending themselves, but also how many of them are there. And so diversity, right? So obviously researchers are getting better and better at seeing indications of these conversations, but what can we look at on the farm to understand what's in place, and how can we also just be okay with not entirely understanding all the mechanisms and all the communications and every moment throughout the season what is going on, but how can we take advantage of that? Well, so quorum sensing is one thing. Rhizophage cycle, I'm going to put in a plug for that too. We have one of the primary researchers that's getting the news out about the rhizophage cycle. You may have heard of that from today's workshop ads, no? Okay, you're in for some amazing stuff. Rhizophage cycle, that's another fairly recent insight that not only endomycorrhizae, so fungi that sort of live inside the root borders, there's also this active exchange of the whole organisms that go in and out of the root hairs. So anyways, there's a lot of conversations going on in the soil all the time, and they get expressed most easily to us. If you're doing microscopy, you can see who's there. You're not looking at chemical signaling, but you can see that those different players are there and what they might be doing. But you're looking at your plants, right? And that's our point of agency. So what can we ask the plants? Before you spend the money on what you're thinking your plants need through your soil test, or from last year's diseases, or the current weather conditions, there's several tools you can use to ask your plants, how are you doing? So, one of those tools, and Derek went into this a little bit, I had some good slides, but feel free to take a picture of this on your camera. Oh, yeah, there's our soil food web. Thanks, y'all. Wow, I brought 4 different ways for my slide presentation to happen, and we still needed this. So, where was I? So rhizophagy. Okay, so crumb sensing, as you can see, plant metabolites. Those are the higher level. Those come from higher functioning plants. So as Derek pointed out in his workshop, just looking at your plants and looking for shiny leaves, you can see that your plants are functioning at a level where they're capable of producing lipids. So we've got carbohydrates, right? Photosynthesis, and that's sort of the foundation of the whole thing. And then we have proteins, fats, going up this soil and plant health pyramid. And the plants that have what they need are creating these signaling molecules, these secondary metabolites that enable their immune system and enable them to call in their immune system helpers. And it's, you can get great seeds with great genetics, but whether those genetics are going to come into play is dependent on all these signals that are happening. So how can we see if this virtuous cycle is happening? Well, a really simple way is to dig a hole or even just pull up your crop that's getting established in June or for the fall crops, later on in the season. But this is, I think it's one of the squash plants. Those roots are intensely covered with that soil community that's creating plant-available forms of nutrition and all those signals. And that this environment, I shook it, I dropped it, and it still held on. So the microbes in the soil building these communities right around the actual roots that's called the rhizosheath, and that's creating a very specialized environment. So you can see, you pull up the roots, oh, well, lots of good things are happening here. This plant is obviously getting somewhat what it needs. And you can see this particular environment, there is a lot of bare soil, there's tillage happening, but the fungi have come back. So another way to look at your plant. Well, I'll go above ground first, and then we'll dig further in the hole. Okay, so that was all the mineral testing. Oh yeah, here was that chart. Same field. This was mixed pasture, but so I sent like a clump of plant tissue. So this is the soil test. Purple is low, pink is high, and green is within range. So the same field, field 9, calcium over here is more than sufficient, even though it was low in the soil. Magnesium or potassium and sodium are low, even though they're very, and so this was like in July. actually. So this is well into the season, and this is evidence that, and then importantly, these trace minerals that are so important for enzymes and immunity with the plants look like they're just not available in the soil. They're very low. But if you look over here, the plants are getting what they need. I don't know what that dialog box is. See if I can get out of it. They're all within range.
Jane,
So before you spend the money,
what lab gives you this result?
both of these came from Regen Ag Lab. And I'm sorry, I meant to print up a list of labs that I've worked with or I'm aware of and what they do. And as you know, your soil acidity will affect nutrient availability and sap acidity. So some of the sap testing that is now possible in the field. I'll show you a picture of one of those. So you can get these pocket meters if you have a large enough operation and it warrants your expense. You could actually save money and not send away your tissue test as often, but instead directly test the sap in your plant in a few different ways. So there's pH. Has anyone done much bricks testing? A little tiny bit? Yeah. So this is your friend for so many reasons. And I would love to hear feedback from people that have gotten into a habit of using a bricks tester. So I'll get into that too. So testing the pH, the conductivity, and the mineral availability, depending on your size and your budget and things like that. This particular implement is about $150. So, but it's like a lab in your field. So plant tissue pH can tell you, am I in the range of our insects and imminent thing? Once the insects hit, well, they change the pH of the sap, and in comes the disease. So one way that you can save money, as I was saying, is ask your plants before you apply materials, before you buy materials. But you also have to, like, labor is the big cost, right, for a lot of people. Just your time and effort. And so finding ways to stack functions. So whatever your daily grooves are, incorporating these ways of asking the plants. And it takes practice. But if you get in the groove and the habit of doing it, you can catch things sooner and sooner and prevent problems and enable your plants to fully express themselves. So this is, I have this handout here with a little flow chart. So this is looking at the condition of your plant's leaves where you might see signals of possible specific mineral deficiencies that have accumulated over this growing season. So that's what's showing you. And if your plants are displaying this, or your weeds are showing signs of this, you might have already gotten into the realm of, well, this season isn't the best one for this particular crop. Or this weed is fading out and I don't have to worry about it. But it'll still tell you a little bit about what's plant available in your soil. So here's, are we doing on time? 11:21. I don't know if this is clear enough, but just an example. So you see like curling leaves, young leaves. So that's the other thing. Some of these nutrients are less mobile in the plant, and so they don't make it up to the new leaves. So you'll see problems in the new leaves. And then some of the minerals are more mobile in the plant, and so you'll see the plant pulling them out of the lower, older leaves and putting them into the newer leaves. So where you see these deformities or discolorations matters on the plant. So this is an example, calcium because calcium isn't that mobile, both calcium and boron insufficiencies show up in sort of the top leaves of the plant. Like, in this case, like, probably it's also short on boron because boron helps calcium get up to the new leaves. So again, these are just examples, like, of lots of things to try. So phosphorus shows up as purpling in the leaves. But again, that doesn't mean that your soil's low in phosphorus, right? It might be early in the season and maybe it'll work its way out, but maybe you can help that plant access that phosphorus by enhancing the soil community. Fungi specifically help plants access phosphorus. Cold weather makes it harder, etc. So, okay, so another thing is microbiometer. Can give you, it's just a little field test. It takes about 20 minutes, or you can just take your sample and do it later in the evening when you're sitting around doing something else, and just wait. And it's a phone app. So that's what this printout is. This is just what was on my phone after I did it. So it shows the overall sort of biomass that's attributable to the microbial life. So it's alive, dormant, alive and active, dormant, and recently dead, but not converted into organic matter. And then it also gives you an idea of your fungal bacteria ratio. And what we found, comparing the microbiometer and maybe others too, with soil food web analysis, is you're getting, like I said, active and dormant fungi, but it gives you an idea of what your soil's potential is. So if you know that a good amount of fungi are there, then you know that conversation is possible, and maybe you need to apply something to jumpstart that conversation. Okay, weeds. Who reads their weeds? They're great conversationalists. They'll tell you a lot. Whether you leave them in place or not, they're still going to give you a lot of information. So they can tell you about the mineral status of your soil. They can tell about compaction in the case of a deep tap-rooted plant like a dandelion. They can be concentrating minerals. So that's another tool, is that if you have like dandelions that are concentrating calcium, you could take your weed sample and send it off to the lab as well and find out, what's this weed concentrating mineral-wise? Can I put it out of a job by either applying that mineral or making that weed into an input itself through fermentation or a tea kind of extract? If you apply the mineral that the weed is hyperaccumulating, that weed will hyperaccumulate it and not do so well and fade away. So yeah, I mean, you can keep going with your normal weed management, but you can also take a look at the weeds and ask them what they're telling you before they're gone. Also, yeah, they're microbial partners. So just like there's crops that don't have mycorrhizal associations, there's also weeds that don't have mycorrhizal associations. Pickweed amaranth is one of those. So some of the weeds can signal high nitrates, which in the case of livestock can signal not the most healthy pasture at this moment in time. So you wouldn't want your livestock grazing, and you wouldn't want to be feeding your customers high nitrate foods. But they can also signal that your plant community is not converting nitrogen well into proteins. So they're not going to go up that ladder of healthy metabolites and get to the point of those secondary metabolites that are responsible for the quality, the flavor, the immunity, the resistance to stress. Oops. There's some other ones that are non-mycorrhizal. So weeds are doing work. Okay, so I'm gonna get into plant bricks. So there's a lot to know. It's a fairly simple process. You can just use a garlic press. This is your main expense right here. It's pretty cheap. You can get it through the Bionutrient Food Association by becoming a member. At least that's where I got mine. You can buy them online. And what you're doing in the field, like some people use this for testing food, but in the field you're testing the sap of the leaves, and you can also test the sap of the leaf petiole. So you just take a few of the youngest fully mature leaves on your plant, and you want to be consistent about how you fold them. So like either you fold them gently and put them in the garlic press, and then you're pressing the sap, just a few drops on this plate. And then as you can see in the diagram, you're reading this line. And it's going to be a little fuzzy, but you can usually distinguish 1 degree of Brix difference. And if it's fuzzy, that's okay. If it's sharp down here at 3 or below, then you're in nitrate territory. So it's a great thing to use in your pasture before you bring your livestock in. It's just to check that. You can check your weeds and compare them to your crops. Does anybody want me to explain what Brix testing is testing? Or what is Brix?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. Brix reads the level of sugar and dissolved solids that are in your plant sap. And that is a pretty direct measurement of your plant's current photosynthetic ability. So if your plant is photosynthesizing well, they're well supported by their soil community. Yep.
Does time of day matter when you do it?
Yes, that's one of the things to know, is you want to give your plants at least 2 hours of sunshine to get that cranking. So a little afternoon sometimes is a good time. And if you can be consistent if you want to compare over time, like just be consistent about the time of day as well as how you roll. So the other thing I was going to say about the rolling is if you twist and crush, you will get a higher reading because you're breaking the cell walls. So if you do that consistently, that's fine because you'll still get your comparison. So again, like this is about comparing your crop's performance over hours, days, or a few weeks at a certain time in the season, ideally in sort of the growth phase of that crop. So as long as you're consistent about how you get the sap. Anyways, the higher readings are maybe like six or more points higher, but if you're just doing comparison, it's okay to have that happen. So comparing your crops with weeds, if you see that your crop has a higher Brix than your weeds, and maybe you repeated it a week from then, and you're wondering about this weed, and this weed goes down in Brix and the crop goes up, well, maybe you don't need to spend as much time, labor, or input worrying about those weeds because they're not doing as well as your crop. So that's an example. Or if they're doing a lot better than your crop, what is that weed's primary, what are some of that weed's primary influences in your plant system. Because that weed's doing really well, right? So what do I need to change about my plant soil system? Nutrition-wise, community-wise, so that's another great indicator. Any more questions? Like, I do have this handout that explains how to operate the bricks meter and some of the things that it's used for.
How much of a sample do you need to make?
Just a couple drops. Yeah. So Robin likes to talk about how she feels like she's going to get a hernia from. So that's part of the reason you want to use the younger leaves at that time in their growth cycle, is to be able to get that sap out. But it really is just a couple of drops, and then it spreads over. And you can make sure there's a calibration screw on here. So if you have some distilled water, you can just make sure that you're calibrated if you care about how it compares to a chart. So there's some charts of crop bricks that you can sort of compare against if you want, but I totally advocate about comparing over time.
Also, real quick, some plants are juicier than others. There are some plants that you roll up and like nothing comes out.
Right.
And then there's some just a tiny little. So that's usually pretty apparent just by the food.
Yeah.
So for somebody coming in who hasn't been doing this, this is a lot of information to absorb, and it's a lot of knowledge and skills to develop in order to actually be able to do this. So my question is, where do you start? Like, you can't obviously
Yeah.
start by spending a semester learning this and not doing anything else. But I assume that there are like ways into this to maybe grow your skills and your knowledge over 5 seasons or something like that.
Yeah. I think the answer to that question is probably different for different people. I mean, what are you imagining for yourself
Well,
might be.
How about this? Assume that you're starting from a level of 0, and then you gave a couple of steps of where you could get started. Then people who are starting with a higher level of knowledge could say, oh, well, I already know how to do that, so I'll just do the next thing, she says.
That is a good question. Like, what is the best starting point? Yeah.
Or the best sequence for learning,
Yeah.
or the best approach for learning. Like,
Yeah.
how do you get all of this into your toolbox?
Right. Yeah. Well,
May I
do you mind if I put that question to
Do you mind
everyone
if
in
I
the room?
tackle that? Do you know any good organic gardeners? Do you know any? Because if you know a good organic gardener, just say, what are you doing? That's a starting place right there. Who else has an answer? Some thoughts on that?
The network of Nova's network helps. You get on that listserv and, put on your property, just throw it out to the listserv.
Well, those sound like pretty, sorry, not to.
No, I mean, just from the ground zero, I always like to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think those are very general answers to the question of how do I become a better farmer or vegetable grower. I'm talking specifically about this presentation, which is that you are looking at your plants.
Yeah.
And what of this presentation, and
Well,
how can you acquire these
Yeah.
skills?
I think on the one, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, there is, to my understanding, I haven't taken the class, but there's a soil food web course online. I don't know if anyone here has
That's the semester.
been involved in it. Yeah, but it's, I think
Oh,
it's.
I just did a one day. So they have shorter ones
And,
too.
yeah,
for
shorter one,
introduction.
I think it's also like at your own pace, all the resources are there. And it's available, I don't know what the cost of it is, but it's available to you for, I think, 1 year from the time that you enroll.
It is actually an auction item, by the way.
Oh, round
Soil food web courses are an auction item this year. And the starting bid is $7,000. The going rate for that is typically $5,000 to $6,000.
Awesome.
Is it
possible that some of these tests might be better at answering the question, what is my situation? And other tests might be better at exploring, why is this my situation? That there might be one that you'd recommend as sort of an initial assessment that might point you toward some of the other tests to assess what can be done to correct if there's a problem detected initially.
Sure, yeah. Well, I think some of those lab plant tissue tests, like why is there a difference between my soil tests and my plant tissue tests, especially if you have a few crops that you're focusing on, or in a pasture situation, I think that can also apply. That's an illuminator for like there's something going on here that's different. And a soil food web analysis, NOFA just charges, I think 150, is it 150? It's not crazy to do it. And so you can get an idea of who is in your soil, because that really does make a difference. But certainly in the field, just starting to really look at your plants as you're like in your habits, like you're out there every day with your animals, look at the plants too as you're moving through, and you probably know much more than zero about your plants, but it's just sort of like sinking into that and starting to read those signals. Shiny leaves, discolored leaves, interesting growth forms, who's there, what different plants are there and which ones are doing better. Are they behaving the same way as you saw them behave, between the drought year and the wet year, who's showing up? So even just like that surface level is great for practice. But in terms of referring to what does that mean, this takes a while, but this is somewhat illuminating as you get into it. It takes practice. Pardon?
Where is it available?
This one, I would suggest if you have a phone and just snap a picture of it today, so then you can go ahead and get started. I'm sorry I didn't print out a bunch of those, but it's kind of a high-powered color printing deal, so I wasn't sure how many people would be here. Okay. And so other thing is like digging a hole. Like a lot of people don't do that, and just looking at your roots is such a quality way of understanding what's going on. I mean, there's just surprises all the time. This is legume roots. There's compaction layer. Oh, look, my roots are starting to form this community. Larger aggregates mean more fungi, smaller aggregates. And a lot of this is like in your intuition, whether you realize it or not. So that, in that case, like this discoloration out here in the field, stunted growth, wasn't evident in the roots. It was evident, there's this situation where there was a lot more gravel in that area of the field. So the other thing I wanted to say in terms of spending money on inputs is if you get in the habit of using this, you can ask your plants if they like an input before you go and spend a lot of money on it or spend a lot of time making enough or spreading it out in your field. Is you can test your plant's photosynthetic capability change over 1 hour in just a small section of your field, over 2 days at the same time of the day, over 2 weeks, or even over a season if you have that time. So it depends on your input and what response that you're expecting. Foliar inputs are great in terms of the plant being able to immediately be able to use these nutrients. So that's a great way. And a way to harness this community of soil microorganisms in your compost, for instance. One way is get comfortable with the microscope, know who's there, know you've got quality, and then you can feed that quality for 24 to 48 hours, making, like, bubbling your compost tea. But you can also just do a 10-minute quick blender version for the extract to get at those signals. So you might not be amplifying the population of your compost, but you're capturing the signals, getting them out there, and letting the plants start their conversations themselves. And if an easy beginner thing is worms. Get your worm composting going, find a friend that likes worm composting, access worm castings. They go so far for so little. They're not cheap in bulk, but you don't need bulk. And if you just put those in, every time you put fertilizer in, you can create extracts and spray them on your seeds. You're getting a whole host of microbial signals and microbial life from worm compost. So even if you have, dried out packaged worm castings, there's nobody probably living in here, but there's a lot of their signaling molecules which call in the party. So it's all about starting conversations.
Jane, I'll say real quick, taking back to your question, using that graph that she has about plant deficiencies and how they look in your plant, and then taking that information and thinking about a foliar application, and then to get confirmation that you're going in the right direction, to do what she's talking about with your refractometer, the Brix meter. So now, to confirm that I'm going in the right direction, I could make a small volume of a foliar application that I think is going to give me a beneficial response based on that graph. I can Brix my plant, breathe in, spray my foliar, and then 20 minutes later, 30 minutes later, Brix it again. The number doesn't matter, but did it go up or did it go down?
20 minutes?
If it goes up, if it's a sunny day, there's a degree of variability there. But again, the number doesn't matter. The issue is, did it go up? If it went up, then that's really valuable feedback that the foliar application that I'm going to spend time on money to apply my plant showed me that that's a positive response. So I'm more likely now, okay, whatever, if I'm running an acre, if I'm running 10 acres, I just got confirmation from my plant that this amendment is something that I should do.
But Joan, how do you know if it's a real difference in the plant because of something the foliar did versus the 20 minutes of extra photosynthesis?
You're going to look at that, and I agree with you. So if let's just say we started at 5, and 20 minutes later it went to 6.
Yeah.
Okay, that could be photosynthetic. But if it went to 12,
Well, what my neighbor here just said, which is a good point, is that maybe try it before. Well, you'd have to have a different plant.
Have a control.
Spray, but try one that hasn't been treated with foliar as a control.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Good.
Always have a control.
Yeah.
And maybe that control includes water, if you're doing a foliar base, right? So you can rule that out. It's just water. So, yeah.
Could you comment on the margin for error just in general for the Brix reading? How exact are the measurements? How much do they really reflect the sugar levels that you're measuring? Is it like 100% accurate, or is there a
If,
range of error in general with what you're reading?
yeah, my understanding from who I learned it from, who works with farmers all over the world, is she's since changed from like 1 degree change to like really 2. So it's fairly, if you're doing your comparison and you're doing it within the same, like I felt more comfortable doing it the same time of the day 2 days later for what I was applying for this particular test. But she even advocates, and she does frequently use it within an hour time. She sees a response. And so if you're looking for like a minimum of a 2-degree change compared to your control. Like in this case, it was pretty obvious, like the control went down. The red is after, the blue is before. The control went down and all the other ones went up. Or in this case, stayed the same over on the far left. So but it is a habit. It is a practice in terms of your level of consistency. So, yeah. And there's things that you can do in the moment, you know, if your plants are crashing. So you can start to learn about some things like that. But obviously there's so much to talk about, and thank you all for hanging in and contributing and I encourage you to even take a look at what might be possible with the bricks measuring. And also my email is on here. I understand that we're going to have a video with the slides after the fact. So you'll have my slides that way, but if you want me to just share some of the slides or share some of the resources that we talked about today, feel free to send me an email, and if we run out, you can just snap a photo of my email or whatever.
I would say you might want to reach out to Jane for the slide deck because of the computer stuff that we had. I don't know that all of that got recorded.
Okay,
The
so it
audio
doesn't-
would have, but I don't know that the slide deck.
Right, okay. Yeah, so I can do that. And then another thing I have here, a fewer, if anyone's interested, is making your own foliar sprays, you know, using the fulvic acid, using compost extracts. So just some guidance on that. And again, consult your plants to find out if they want it. But this is about signals, communication, getting the conversation started so you can use less. So you can use grams and cups, pounds per acre, instead of pounds and tons per acre of these mineral suspects. So,
Very general question, but specific to what someone was asking. Do you know of any organizations or schools that provide people, interns, willing to say come and have a test plot on your land as a way to sort of initiate sort of any of these practices?
huh. You mean like ag school students?
Yeah, or
Yeah.
someone connected to NOFAR. Just, there are a lot of young people out there who don't have land and who are interested in maybe making just either renting a place from you or getting just a little something in return who could then, if you're really busy,
Yeah.
start this test plot and
So
we're gonna test
within a farming
farming.
operation,
Yeah.
giving a test plot to a
As a
student?
way, if you're already operating, to start small and have
Right.
someone doing it for you, and then
That's
you're seeing what
fantastic.
they're doing, but you're not having to spend your time.
That's awesome.
So what
Yeah.
we would love to do
I would just reach out to,
is form relationships with like
Yeah.
our vocational schools
yeah,
that have plant programs or community colleges. I mean, this is something Ruben and I talk about all the time.
Yeah.
Because they have the capacity to do data, to do the testing. They've got the ability to work on the principle and then find the practical and then say, this is what we did, here are some things that work, and then y'all, as growers, can plug it in and then see if it works there. Because everybody's situation is different. And that's the tough part. We talk a lot about principle.
right.
How are we going to get it
How-
to practicality that's where we all need to have collaboration, and y'all need to, well, that's a pretty good idea. Can I apply it? We work very hard at trying to get you tools and information and make it affordable, but we need your help to figure out how to make it practical. And that's where, these conferences work. That's where, you guys exchanging information with us. That's how we're going to do it. It's not going to happen quick
Yeah.
because we're a nonprofit. But
There's a lot of
that's the goal.
nonprofits, Yeah,
That's the goal.
yeah. Cool. Well, come to the soil panel.